Welcome to the State of Affairs in partnership with Serbian Radio Chicago and Intelligencer Today. I am honored to have a good friend on, a repeat guest, and somebody who is part of the new Intelligencer portal, George Papadopoulos. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be back.
So George is somebody who has been targeted for a very long time by the deep state, wrote an incredible book, Deep State Target. And fast forward to now, it seems that a lot of the things that George spoke about have been kind of coming to fruition through some of these lawsuits and cases that are coming up. So George, it feels like you are closer and closer to vindication, and not just you, but President Trump as well. Tell me kind of, if you can, in short, what's been happening lately where I feel there is the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, I mean, what a last couple of weeks in the news cycle. Let's just recap a bit of what's been happening. You had Mayorkas impeached, and shortly thereafter, you have this bombshell story from these two liberal reporters, Matt Taibbi and Schellenberger, who I was in communication with leading up to this bombshell story about this criminal conspiracy that involved the upper echelons of the Obama administration, the head of the CIA, and not only US intelligence, but something that you mentioned that I've been saying for a long time, and that this was a global conspiracy to take down a populist, economic nationalist candidate and agenda. And the story now involves not only the CIA, not Obama, but of course MI6. You have Mossad involved, Italian governments, Australia, and likely even more. So this was a coordinated effort now. This wasn't a rogue FBI operation to take down Trump. I've always said that idiots like Peter Strzok and Lisa Page were not running the operation. This went at the very top of the global power system, and they zeroed in on us. It failed, and this is just now coming out.
Fascinating. So you uncovered a lot of this in your book, and you've been speaking about it for so long. And now truly we're now finding out that all of it was a fact, and that the Obama White House was directly coordinating with different, not just our own agencies, with other agencies, intels around the world, as you just mentioned. But one significant thing to me is, and I think it's a more important interview than the Tucker Putin interview. It was the interview Tucker had with Mike Pence. And Mike Pence kind of told us the same thing you've been telling us about, but in a more technical way, meaning that our intelligence agencies, whose job, and we all have done a lot of work around the government, we understand how they operate, but their job was to look outward. They have turned inward, targeting people like yourself, targeting the president, and essentially targeting the American people.
Yeah, I guess the moment that the intel agencies turn against the American people, become enemies of the American people, they no longer serve a useful purpose. And that's why I think we live in a completely different world post 2016. Because before 2016, if anybody would even discuss what Benz was talking about on Tucker Carlson, or what we're even discussing on your show today, people would think it's conspiracy theory, that the CIA, the FBI, of course, they would never target law-abiding citizens. It's always the criminals, it's the terrorists, it's the mafia states. It's a good and evil world. It's black and white. What we have discovered is that the world is in a gray zone. And that gray zone means that the only way to secure our liberties as Americans is to hold these agencies accountable. And by doing that, you have Congress who needs to work towards that goal. You need a president who abides by the Constitution and puts America first. And you have to be very cognizant of how this impacts our foreign policy, which I think is something that what we have learned over these weeks now is that it's not only domestic implications, but foreign implications as well.
It's huge foreign implication, because now we can link some of this to the current destabilizations that we have around the world, especially since Biden administration took reins and told us that the adults are now in charge. Well, now with the adults in charge, the world is collapsing and everything is falling apart. So in light of now mentioning the Tucker and President Putin interview and the continued operation in Ukraine, what did you make out of the interview?
My initial response to the interview was that Putin came across as an intellectual, as somebody who knows his history, knows his facts, because facts are very important in this era of disinformation and propaganda that the left continues to spew through the intel agencies, and that's of course recycled in a lot of the New York Times, the Washington Post, Politico, some of these other news sources. So to actually have a situation in which the narrative is no longer controlled by the left, by the US intelligence agencies when it comes to hearing Putin or hearing the Russian perspective or any other perspective. I thought it was fascinating. And I think Putin did an incredible job by just laying out facts. And I think the most important takeaway were the following. One, that Putin actually wanted to join the West in some shape or form. The West didn't want it. So it highlighted that the West has continuously sought to provoke Putin, provoke Russia ever since they bombed Serbia. They then extended NATO, and Putin made this extremely clear. And then secondly, I would say that his ability to have a peace deal in the current war with Ukraine was torpedoed by none other than Boris Johnson, who was the Prime Minister of the UK. Now, that goes at the heart of what we discussed at the beginning of this conversation about how MI6 with CIA coordinates to create chaos and instability around the world. And I think now with the story that came out about how the British with the CIA sabotaged Trump and how they're working to sabotage peace, that's also a new facet of the argument that the American people have to look at of who really is running our foreign policy.
That is a great point, because not too long ago, I had a conversation with a really good journalist who works for the Gray Zone, Kit Klarenberg. And Kit was, as of late, kicked out from Twitter, from X, for his reporting. But my question to him was, and it's something that I constantly kind of wonder about, and you brought it up, who actually runs our foreign policy? And in fact, have we ever essentially liberated ourselves from the British monarchy? And are we the foot soldiers for the British or Great Britain, British monarchy, whatever you wish to call it? Or are we running it and they are a tool of ours? I find those two things fascinating.
Look, if we go back to what happened in 2016 and the sabotage of Trump, what did the report that we referenced highlight? It goes back to March of 2016 in London and in Rome. It didn't start in Washington, D.C. or in New York. And it's very important to understand that, because for the operation to be run out of these two cities, that means, of course, that the British were running and creating the situation in which the CIA then, of course, got involved. Of course, it was a collusion scheme. Well, it doesn't, they both obviously operated together. But when you see that aspect, and then you see how the British then are torpedoing peace deals with Ukraine, which would have prevented thousands of more deaths, billions of dollars more of US taxpayer dollars, and the United States standing in the world. And now you have the British escalating tensions in the Gulf with Iran in the Strait of Hormuz, bombing Yemen, leading that operation, sending jets from Cyprus, where they have 2 military bases, to bomb Syria. This really shows me that the United Kingdom, outside of the European Union, now is much more emboldened to stand on its own, because they understand that they are leading the United States into these different forays, which are doing absolutely nothing but actually collapsing our economy from within, while the United Kingdom actually stays relatively unscathed, because they're not the ones sending billions of dollars to Ukraine. They're not the ones who are potentially, footing the bill for NATO in case there's a conflict with Russia. They're not the ones with the global military supremacy like the United States. However, they are using the United States to fulfill their objectives. And that's what we're seeing in various theaters around the world, from the Middle East to Ukraine.
100%. And I will add to that, we also see that in the Balkans, because if you look at Serbia's issue with Kosovo secession, and currently what is happening, everybody sort of asks, well, who is backing Kurti in Kosovo, given that even the Biden administration finally, 3 years later, came out against him. So everyone agrees, even the Republicans and the Democrats, that there are provocations in the Balkans that are very one-sided. Everyone wonders, well, who is backing him, because he is doubling and tripling down. So I think this is a very important piece for everyone to understand. It is global. You are very correct. There was something else that I wanted to bring up, and I know we mentioned it as we were starting the interview. FBI, Charles McGonigal. What is the story there? Because there are, again, some very interesting connections, given that both of us, as of late, have been victims of insane attacks by specific entities and individuals. All of this seems to tie together.
Yeah, a very, very fascinating situation with Charles McGonigal. Charles McGonigal, for the viewers to understand, was not Peter Strzok. This wasn't Lisa Page. This was their boss. This was the head of counterintelligence of the FBI's New York office, which is the second largest office in the United States beside Washington, D.C., if my memory serves me correct. And he's also the one who created the so-called Crossfire Hurricane investigation. Now,
exactly,
based on what we know now with facts and reporting, that this Crossfire Hurricane investigation was not a justified, spontaneous investigation that just was launched in 2016, but goes back into March of 2016 with the British, the Italians, and Mossad and the CIA creating it. The interesting about McGonigal is he was just sentenced to 6 years in prison. Why was Charles McGonigal sentenced to 6 years in prison? The same guy who was trying to frame me, Trump, others as Russian operatives, as foreign intelligence operatives, because he actually was a foreign intelligence operative himself. And he was not only working with Russian oligarchs to help them evade sanctions and do probably other stuff. That was just the cover story, I believe. I think it goes much deeper than that. Mm-hmm. But also, he was sentenced to 2 years in prison for conspiring with Albanian intelligence officials. Why is this so interesting, and why does it have relevance to what we're talking about here? You have been attacked by Albanian communities here in the United States. I most recently have been subjected to some tirades by some members who represent themselves as part of the Albanian diaspora. And even Charles McGonigal's old girlfriend or wife messaged me and said that McGonigal and Albanians knew what they were up to when they were targeting me. I didn't get into too many details, but that's something moving forward I would like much more to find out about. And I think it really goes to the heart of what Albania's strategy is against Serbia, against Greece, in the Balkans, how they leverage their relationship with the Democrats, with the CIA, with the FBI, with dirty operatives in the FBI to do their bidding, not only in the Balkans, but also in the United States. And that's something moving forward we should be very aware about, how some of these diaspora groups who do come from very corrupt societies like Albania, like Kosovo, how they might actually be influenced from those countries and about what they're doing in the United States. So that really, I think, links what happened with McGonigal, with myself, and some of these bizarre activities of their diaspora in the United States towards Trump supporters now.
That is very fascinating, because again, what you are laying out is everything that they've been doing, they are accusing others of. It's a pure reflection. And it's fascinating that people actually do this and think in this way, but of course, not surprising whatsoever. That is the tactic. One other thing that I think is important to address, and we all are following, because now there is this big energy coming forward, given that we're in 2024, we are launching different initiatives, different activities, events, etc. President Trump, obviously, undisputed leader. There is no Republican Party, or let's call it a conservative movement, without President Trump. The Republican Party, the establishment, and the Uniparty is a whole different animal. But I think he still keeps the Republican Party alive because there wouldn't be any without him. He beat all of his opponents. He continues to beat them. He is leading in all the polls, even against President Biden in key states. And now we are getting to a conversation about his potential VP pick. Now, you have some insight into, given your previous work and activities with Dr. Ben Carson. What are your thoughts on the VP pick? How important is this going to be? And could it be anyone from the list of the competitors that have gone against him in this primary season?
Okay. I think in order of importance regarding cabinet picks for Trump's second term go as the following. First, Attorney General. Second, CIA Director / FBI Director. Third, Vice President. Now,
Interesting.
I personally don't think that Trump will choose his vice president from any of the people that he overwhelmingly defeated without even debating once. I think people like Vivek Ramaswamy were artificially propped up to some very bizarre extent on Fox, mainstream media, and he barely gained 2% of the vote, the electorate. So I thought that was an interesting dynamic, given how much airtime he was given, but he still couldn't resonate with the American people, even though he was almost forced on the American people by the Conservative Party. So then you look at people like Nikki Haley. She represents a different Republican Party, which I don't think the American people want anymore. They don't support that agenda. They don't support unfair trade, forever war, and keeping our border open the way that Nikki talks about. And DeSantis, who I had very high hopes for, while he does have a strong record as Florida's governor and he was a congressman, I don't think it was the right moment for him to run. And that clearly, I think, might have sabotaged any ability for him to be selected vice president because of that bad blood, if you will. And then there are other candidates who I don't even think are relevant to even get into a more in-depth discussion about them, because they never had any impact on the debate stage. Now, when you look at the vice president, when I worked for Ben Carson's campaign before I joined Trump's, this was a man who actually led the polls at one point besides Trump, and he had a steady 10 to 12% of the electoral support. No other candidate had that type of support this cycle. Trump just sucked all of the air out of the room. So if I'm Trump, I see the candidates I ran up against. I saw they didn't really resonate with the American people. They don't really give me any added value outside of potential competitors, or might have even want to sabotage me as president because they're aspiring presidents or aspiring whatever. So I'm going to look at who's been loyal to me, who's been loyal, who is popular among the American voters, the MAGA electorate, let's say, and who was successful working with me in the past. Everybody. And lastly, who can actually bring more voters under the conservative umbrella. When I look at those factors, which I think are very important when you're selecting a critical role like vice president, all roads lead to Ben Carson. I've been a supporter of Dr. Ben Carson as Trump's VP choice from the beginning. I'm very vocal about it on X, and I believe eventually he will pick Dr. Ben Carson as his vice president.
Wow, that is fascinating. And Dr. Ben Carson is a fine man, well-spoken, mild-mannered. I think that would complement President Trump so well. And you're right, he really could bring a lot of value to this ticket. Democrat side, though, President Biden seems to be unable to stand trial. However, he's able to be president. The Democrats don't really seem to actually have a good candidate. Do you think any of these? I just heard a very interesting scenario from somebody that Hillary Clinton will be somehow propped up via all kinds of different shenanigans. What do you think the possibility for Hillary or somebody else replacing President Biden is? We've heard Michelle Obama. I mean, there's um a lot of scenarios out there.
Look, I think that the Democrats, first of all, let's look at what really happened in the 2020 election. And without even getting into potential irregularities or fraud or shenanigans with the election as a whole, let's look at just one fact that's now indisputable. The CIA, the 51 intelligence operatives, signed this letter that said that Hunter Biden's laptop was disinformation when they knew that it was not disinformation, it was verifiable, it was real, and that the Biden family is incredibly corrupt. That is something that they knew in 2020. Now, when the CIA went out and said that, that arguably tilted the election to Biden.
Yes.
Was it because that they loved Biden? Was it because they thought Biden was the best candidate? Absolutely not. They involved themselves in yet another criminal conspiracy to just get anybody in there to stop the Trump agenda, to get Trump out there, to then wage this lawfare against him, to basically destroy the Republican Party. Moving forward, now in this election, Trump is more popular than ever. All the lawfare that's been waged against him, and why I mentioned earlier that his attorney general, in my opinion, is the most important cabinet pick he's going to make, has made him so popular that they don't know what to do right now. And whether they want to interfere, whether they don't, Biden clearly is not a long-term answer. He's not even a short-term answer. But I think a person like Hillary Clinton, who's corrupt as hell, basically, has been under myriad investigations and is somebody that just will not be a viable candidate for them. Biden is under criminal investigations as well. His son is under criminal investigations currently. But what are they going to do? Are they going to replace him at the very last minute with somebody like Gavin Newsom, who also has so many issues in California, where the state is in a chaotic situation with homelessness, high taxes, instability in the streets? I don't think they can do it. So I think they're going to be stuck with Biden. It's going to be Biden-Trump. Trump is going to come out victorious. And moving forward, they're probably going to have to redesign what kind of party they want moving forward, because I also think that the Democrats are in a state of confusion. They have their own identity crisis right now. They don't know how far left they want to go. Do they want to be Kennedy Democrats? Do they want to be AOC Democrats? Obviously, Biden fits into none of that, so that's why Biden is just a sitting duck. So there are going to be many questions moving forward, but to answer your question, I think it's still going to be Trump Biden.
Interesting. Well, you mentioned the Kennedys. Robert Kennedy Jr., viable candidate. What do you think? Who is he impacting more? I don't think he's impacting President Trump. In the beginning, I thought that for a split second, but I don't think so anymore. Does he have that name recognition, and can he somehow impact Biden to such a degree? And then do you possibly even see him, because there are some conversations about him down the road being somehow a part of the Trump administration?
Look, he's running as a third-party candidate. He's not even running as a Democrat, so you could call him an independent, if you will.
Yes.
Does he have some interesting ideas? Yes. However, most of those ideas, from green energy to abortion to some other, sensitive topics, don't really overlap with what MAGA voters care about or stand for. So I think that kind of gets rid of him as a viable VP candidate or a high-profile potential position in any Trump administration, simply because he's more or less a Democrat who's running as an independent. Now, who is he going to take more votes from? Is it going to be Trump or Biden? I think he's going to take more votes from Biden, simply based on the fact that Biden does not represent even what the Democrats want today. He is not a young minority candidate who fits various boxes the way that they're all about identity politics. So the Democrats want him out of there as soon as possible. So I think a person like Kennedy will just simply take from him, from moderate Democrats out there, younger voters who say, I don't like this guy Biden, but Kennedy's the closest thing to what normalcy is in our party. let's vote for him, see what happens. And I think it's going to benefit Trump in the end.
Absolutely. Fascinating insight. We are absolutely Trump team. That is for certain, and launching some of our events and campaigns as we speak. Thank you for being with us again, and we will see you soon.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.